Good afternoon, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to this event this afternoon. My name is Laura Clark. I'm the CEO of ClientEarth, an organization that uses the law to improve climate and environmental outcomes around the world. In the spirit of reconciliation, ClientEarth acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. It is a real privilege to be introducing this session today. Now, we know that millions of people around the world are already feeling the impact of climate change and environmental damage to their lives, their culture, and their way of life. But today we're going to hear from some of the people who are not just on the front line of climate impacts, but are also some of the most powerful advocates for climate action, both at a local and also at a global level. Now, at ClientEarth, we've been supporting one group from the Torres Strait Islands in their legal complaint against the Australian government at the UN Human Rights Committee. Now, you'll hear later from the inspiring Yessie Mosby, one of the group that took that complaint. So I don't want to talk too much about that case now, as I think it's much more important that you hear directly from him. But I would just like to say thank you. Thank you to Yessie and the other claimants involved in the case. And thank you for allowing us to support you in your claim. Because taking legal action against government is never easy. It's not something that you do lightly. But what Yessie and other complainants have done doesn't just help protect their island's culture and way of life. It has helped develop precedent, an approach that can be replicated by others. We're also going to hear today from some extraordinary climate and environmental advocates from the Philippines, Brazil, and Liberia, who are also using the law as an effective tool to make change. Ultimately, of course, we need to see governments around the world start to be much more proactive in taking meaningful action to reduce emissions, tackling climate change, but also adapting to an already warming world and protecting cultures and ways of life. Now, the work of these amazing people on this panel today, who are going to talk about their work, is playing a vital role in making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. So my name is Beth Roberts. I'm the director for the Center for Women's Land Rights at Landesa. Landesa is an international land rights organization that has worked in over 50 countries over the last 40 years. We work directly with governments to secure land rights and land governance for mostly people living in rural areas, so Indigenous peoples and local communities, working directly with civil society and communities, and with a focus on gender equality and social inclusion. As a US citizen, and since this event is focused on loss and damage, I want to acknowledge that there is no climate change without the extraction and the colonialism and the neocolonialism of my country and of European countries. Without the extraction of natural resources, including fossil fuels, without the slave trade, without the genocide and the land theft of Indigenous peoples, and without the ongoing extraction of natural resources and the overconsumption of natural resources that drives loss and damage and fossil fuel use and climate change today. So this event is focused on loss and damage. Loss of what? Loss of ecosystems, loss of livelihoods, damage to cultural resources, damage to Indigenous communities and local communities. This is something that my country is accountable for. We've seen in this COP, finally loss and damage be put on the agenda. That is long overdue. This is a topic that has been advocated for by least developed countries for many, many years, over a decade. And it is finally on the agenda, and we have seen developed countries put forward real financial pledges My country, the U.S., being the exception to that. We have seen a commitment to consider a financial facility for loss and damage, but we have not seen a real financial commitment from the U.S. yet. But we have seen financial commitments from Scotland, from New Zealand, from Ireland, so it is progress. But we are calling for much more, and we are counting on not just a commitment of financial resources to countries that are suffering the impacts of climate change and have contributed the least to climate change, but we are calling for a transformation of the colonial and neo-colonial systems that have caused this crisis in the first place. And we are calling for accountability and a transformation of those power systems that have caused that harm. My organization, Landessa, focuses on land rights as the bedrock for not just securing rights to mitigate the harms that come from slow onset disasters from the climate crisis, as well as rapid onset disasters, but as a tool for mitigation for the climate crisis itself. So when Indigenous peoples and local communities and women and youth within those communities have secure rights to land, that land is more secure from the impacts of climate change. They have the security to plant trees. They have the security to restore and protect degraded landscapes. There is so much evidence from the IPCC, from the IPBES, and from many other sources that Indigenous peoples and local communities are the best stewards of land. They manage well over half of the Earth's land in forests, in grasslands, in croplands, in peatlands, in coastal areas, and yet they have legally recognized rights to less than 10% of that land. However, the voluntary guidelines on the governance of tenure, which have been agreed upon by the vast majority of governments worldwide, recognize rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities as legitimate tenure rights. What we need to do now is to implement, to recognize, to ensure, and to enforce those rights to land. I'm so thrilled to be moderating this panel today and to be on this panel with this esteemed group of speakers. They have elected to introduce themselves. There is a wealth of expertise and experience and passion and so much work that each one of these individuals is doing in their communities at the national level and at the international level to see rights for Indigenous peoples and local communities secured and to see the climate crisis arrested and reversed. So I'm pleased to turn over the mic here to my colleague Joan Carling to introduce herself and to tell us about her work. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Joan Carling. I am an Indigenous activist from the Philippines, and I've been an activist for a lifetime. My passion is social justice and non-discrimination and upholding the dignity of Indigenous peoples. And that's why I worked with several Indigenous organizations from, of course, where I come from. And now I am working with the Indigenous Peoples' Rights International, and we work on the issue of human rights violations with impunity and the prevention of the criminalization of Indigenous peoples, which is very much apparent now, including in the climate change solutions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Saye Thompson from Liberia. I am the chairperson of the Community Forest Management Body and also chairperson of the Co-Management Committee of East Nima Nature Reserve. It's a protected area. And presently, I will ask the audience to do some tradition a little bit before I go ahead. I would like to recognize my officials from Liberia, the Forestry Development Authority, and the Environmental Protection Agency bosses. You are all recognized. I'm a community right defender working in Liberia with 49 community forest institutions, and also working with a national multi-stakeholder platform, joint community implementation platform in Liberia. I work also with the community forestry working group that also community relate problem to, and now take this problem to the national level where every agency, ministries, they are all there to see what our community is having in mind, to tell them what is the problem in community, what are the development in need. So these are the platform and these are the work we do in Liberia. Thank you.
Boa tarde a todos e a todas. Sou Dinamam Tuxá, trabalho na coordenação executiva da Articulação dos Povos Indígenas do Brasil, que temos atuado principalmente na garantia do acesso aos territórios indígenas, através das demarcações, como também na incidência no campo internacional. Então, nós temos atuado, inclusive, denunciando o Estado brasileiro, o governo, no Tribunal Penal Internacional, denunciando dos crimes contra os povos indígenas, né, crime de genocídio e ecocídio contra os povos indígenas e meio ambiente. Também temos feito inúmeras cautelares para a CIDH, né, com a incidência internacional, e dentro do território nacional, nossa incidência se dá muito na litigância estratégica, buscando a Suprema Corte para a garantia de direitos fundamentais dos povos indígenas. Então, esse é um recorte da atuação da AIPP, juntamente com o seu jurídico, buscando principalmente a implementação, né, de acordos e tratados internacionais, como também a implementação ou o cumprimento, na verdade, do nosso texto constitucional, né, que é a garantia da demarcação das terras indígenas. Obrigado.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this mighty land here, Egypt, past, present, and emerging. I would like to acknowledge all the leaders who are sitting here in the audience. My name is Yessie Mosby. I'm from the island of Masig in the Kulkalgal region of Zenadkes, Torres Strait, which is situated between Australia and Papua. We're Australian natives. I am one of the 8 claimants, and my son is sitting there. He's one of the 6 children who are a part of the claimants where we took our government to court through UN, and we won our case. Living on an island where you don't have no hills, it's a coral atoll. The only thing you have is the highest ground on your island is a Telstra Tower. And see how your home is being washed away every single day, that it affects your culture and your tradition and your way of life. That the one thing you relied on, which was the sea, as we are sea people, for your daily staple of food to feed your families, becomes the biggest fear and your nightmare at night when you sleep. To go to bed where your children is suckled under your mother's breast and they're crying when the wind screams like wolves howling at night when it runs through waves and it crashes on the beaches, washing away a meter, that you cannot do something to save your home. The only thing is you just stand there and watch how climate change is eating your mother away. The island where I come from is not just an island to me and my people, it's our mother, it's our home. It's our maternity ward, our hospital, our school. It's our library, it stores a lot of ancient knowledge, our home. We are a race of people that we resided in Australia, and our culture remains intact still today for over 60,000 years. And we're a proud race of indigenous people where we still carry our culture very strong. But climate change has impacted my mother, not only from my home, but for all the saltwater people where we call Zenat home. 2019 was the fearful thing where made me to be what I am today as an activist. English is my third language, and I've learned it very quick because I have a very powerful message which I have to tell everybody, that my home is sinking and my home is eaten away. My people is suffering, my people is dying. 2019 was the most dreadful day for me and my son and my family when we were walking on the beach and picking up my great-grandmother's remains like shells off the beach. It's not right for no man to witness or experience something like that in life. Especially when you see your son carries her great-great-great-grandmother's jaw and placing her in a bucket. It affects you. It affects your life. It affects how you live. We as spiritual people, we believe in life after death, and we do believe that when our loved one passes on to the next life, she or he remains under the ground, not allowed to be disturbed. How can we stop it? We couldn't stop it. We have no seawalls around our home. That's when we took up this fight and we sought help. And ClientEarth assisted us in that, where we took this biggest fight ever, knowing that our government slammed a lot of doors in our indigenous face. It wasn't funny. We had no doors which was opened to us. But on 23rd of September 2022, a big giant door opened, and the ripples of that water which came out, the ripple goes to the end of the earth, and we know, and where my people are so proud, the Zenat people are so proud for this, because we know that this door has not only been opened for my people, but it has been opened for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So you can see we have some powerful advocates on the stage. So I'm going to turn it back over to Joan. Joan, the floor is yours. Each of you has 10 minutes to tell the story of your work and to tell the audience what you'd most like folks to hear here at COP about the work that you do.
Thank you. Maybe just to provide a bit more of an additional overview about indigenous peoples, because I will be speaking from the perspective and experience of indigenous peoples. So to begin with, the global population of indigenous peoples is only 6%, but we are in more than 90 countries, and we protect 80% of biodiversity and manage 20% of land, but only 10% has legal recognition. Only 10%. So 90% has no legal protection over their lands, territories, and resources, which is protected by international law, by international human rights instruments, particularly ILO Convention 169, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And this is not providing us special rights. These are not special rights. These are fundamental rights for indigenous peoples to attain non-discrimination, equality, and dignity. So with that, I want to stress that point, because with the non-recognition of our rights, we are being criminalized when we protect our lands. Even companies, even renewable energy companies accuse us of destruction of property when we are defending our lands for our livelihood, for our culture, for the future generation. And so that is what we are working with my organization, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights International. And that is why I'm here, because we want to show that without the protection of human rights, the real solutions to climate change will not be achieved. In fact, we are becoming the victims of these so-called solutions. The transitional minerals, which is demanded to generate for electric cars, are going to expand, and that means land grabbing if we do not secure our lands. We already see this in a number of renewable energy projects, not only the transitional mineral. We see this in geothermal plants, hydro dams, nuclear power, windmills, solar farms. These are being imposed in our lands without our consent. So we are bringing attention to the need that in order for us to address climate change and provide real solutions, we need the rights holders at the center of deciding what solutions, what actions are needed. We are at the front line, and we of the impacts of climate change, and we again become the victims of the solutions. Yet we are the ones protecting nature. Isn't that absurd? So we have nowhere to go when our rights are violated but to seek legal remedies and take this with other forms of actions, because we know that access to justice is not an easy game. It is still a power game. Who controls resources, who controls the politics, and the country dictates what access to justice looks like, right? But because we have the protection of international law, we are using that as a tool, even if our rights are not recognized at the country level. So just to cite two cases of wins of indigenous peoples, I want to mention the case of the windmill in Norway, where it was planned, it was built actually in the territories of the Sami people in the Sapmi land. At the very beginning, they were already saying that that will affect the reindeer herding. And the government said, no, it will not have any effects because it's windmill, you know. And then they said, no, it will. The reindeers will avoid that area. And they said no, so they without the consent, they built the windmills. And true enough, the reindeer herders, the reindeers, which is part of the identities and cultures of the Sami, avoided that area, and it became a problem. So they filed the case. They filed the case at the Supreme Court, and they won. The Supreme Court upheld their right, their cultural right, their right to their own lifestyle as reindeer herders. And the court invoked the Convention on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights as a basis for that decision. So that is a big win for indigenous peoples. Unfortunately, there's no action done yet, but yeah. So that's one case. The other case, another windmill, and this is in Africa. This is in Kenya. It's the Lake Turkana, which the Turkana people have community land rights. And that was clearly violated when the windmills were developed. So again, they filed a case in court, and I want to mention what the court ruling says. The court rules, the Kenyan Environment and Land Court rules that the land deeds upon which Lake Turkana wind power project sits were unlawful. It violated the community land rights, so the company should pay due compensation to the landowners. So that's another case where the land rights of indigenous peoples were upheld by national court. So we are now seeing at least there's hope. We are now seeing that national courts are starting to uphold the international protection of indigenous people's rights. And it's now giving us access to justice somehow. And we hope that this will continue, because we fear that more and more of this kind of projects will be built in indigenous territories in the name of climate change, in the name of sustainable development. So with that, I just want to show that somehow it's important for us not to lose hope in spite of the difficulties that we face. But it's important for all indigenous to remain solid and united in our struggle, because with our unity and with our allies, we can win the battles. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. Thank you for those powerful examples. And now I'd like to pass the floor to Saye Thompson. Saye, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me the time. Well, as we are in Liberia, the case of Liberia, as we have it now, is very much important in the face of giving right to community to own their forest land, where they themselves have to manage, utilize it for the betterment of their community. In 2006, there was a National Forestry Reform Law that gave birth to the right of community owning the land. And from this background, it is from this background, community established and apply to the Forestry Development Authority with a non-refundable fee of $250 to register and own the forest, in terms of having an agreement with Forestry Development Authority to manage this forest for 15 years. If this forest is managed a proper way, the extension will be made just as community requests to manage their forest. They will continue to manage this forest. And the sole purpose of FDA, the government of Liberia giving forest to community, is that in the past, in the 50s, 60s, it was very difficult for community to benefit from their own forest. Other logging companies were there, harvesting laws, and nothing they would give to community. But the government of Liberia looked into it and said, no, this time around, we need to give the forest back to the owner. That is, communities should benefit from their own forest. There are procedures that government gave to Liberia before obtaining this forest. There were 9 steps that you have to follow, these 9 steps. And the 9 steps, following the 9 steps, will give you the right, the power. That means you need to follow some documentation that you come from this. You need to create awareness. You need to do inventory on the forest and know what kinds of resources in our forest. Then FG will give you the go-ahead to manage this forest. And you need to set a governance structure. You set a government structure that will run the forest management activity day by day. Like I am the chairperson of my forest. We have the community assembly that comprises of the local authority and citizens. We have the executive committee that also appoints us. And the work we do, we report to the executive committee, and the executive committee report to the community assembly. We have the chain of leadership reporting system. Now, the government did this because every community needs to really know what is in the forest how to benefit from the forest, which these things the forest is giving, we continue to ask for support from the government, from partners to see how best they build the community capacity in terms of managing the forest. Forest management is a huge tax. It's not just to go and cut the wool. How to cut the wool. Where you are carrying the wool, what you want to do with the wool. It entails heavy work. And looking at the rights given to community, it shows that for every country, for every government, you need to feed down to your citizens. From that background, citizens will know how to join you to manage or to take care of the natural resources. There's a story that if the person that lives in a forest, if the person is not part of the management, he will be the person to destroy the forest. Bringing community on board to make community as owner of the forest will secure the forest sufficiently where both parties, government and community, will benefit from this forest. From the background of giving right to community to obtain, giving forest to the community to obtain a state of right, I was elected as chairman from the community level, and I'm also serving as chairperson from the East Dinamam Nature Protected Area. It is the only protected area in Liberia that have co-management system, and I serve as a chairperson. Today, the FDA staff in Liberia are protecting that forest, the East Dinamam Nature Reserve. The chief park warden is the co-chair. I'm the chair. So before, FDA used to complain that citizens are going to the forest. They are hunting. They are harvesting non-timber forest products. But this time, the management lies in the hands of both FDA and the community. So who will be the person to go into the forest will be the community responsibility. We have shared responsibility. The FDA rangers have the shared responsibility. We as community, we have shared responsibility. So if any other person violates these laws, we are the same community people join the FDA people, the FDA workers or employees to see what best we can do to that person. But we have National Forestry Reform Law, Protected Area Management Law, that if you violate this law, it could be you kill any animal which is protected animal. There's a law. There's a penalty for that law. So we are using the law to see how best community and FDA can coexist. From that again, there was another law that Liberia government introduced, which is the Land Right Act. The Land Right Act was signed 2018, giving the land back to the community. So two rights have been given to the community: the forest management right and the usage of the land, the ownership of the land. These two rights have been given to the community. Government is doing that the huge land space are going. They alone can manage that land. Now, the management system they have, which is the land use planning, they know what, government know what to do on this land and what not to do. Community portion of this land is what community will use. So now, if there is any company that wants to go, like before, to any community land, they have to ask their community land development committee that yes, we are XYZ company, we want to work here, and these are the people. Government will tell them, go to that group, they know about the community land. So this time is not like before, where somebody will just get out and go into community land and start to do anything. No, my bosses are here. It is a system that has been put in place to work along with government, for government to work along with us. If there's any issue arising from the management system, we will be informed. and we take this issue to the platform. There are 4 good platforms that we relate to. So if you look at this platform, is to inform both community and government, private sector, that this is what community needs. Now, all of the structure we put in place, we have NGOs, we have civil society, we work with all. But one NGO that assisted us from 2017 up to today is ClientEarth. We must give ClientEarth a big hand clap for the work they do for us. ClientEarth is the one that assisted us to even talk to FDA to see how we can develop a national template called commercial use template. This commercial use contract template means if you have third party, community have the shared responsibility, and the logging company have the shared responsibility to see how both of you can work together without confusion. And in this template is where community get the money with no problem, commercial activity, the company work with no problem. So ClientEarth assisted us to develop this law. And this, a template. So this template is what we are using this time. So if you look at us coming here, we are come to tell the world that the balanced forest we have, there should be support given to our community, our government, to see how best we can manage our balanced resources so that we can get into other predicament in the world. Climate change is taking place, how we want to build resilience to climate change. Thank you.
Saye, thank you so much. What an incredible example of implementing the law and of community engagement. Thank you so much for telling that story. It's my pleasure now to turn the floor over to Dinamam Tuxá to share his story with us. Dinamam, the floor is yours.
Bom, gente, eu acho que falar da atuação dos povos indígenas no Brasil, de país que hoje ser indígena é um risco pela nossa integridade, é um país que mais ameaça e mata lideranças indígenas e defensores ambientais. E a atual conjuntura política brasileira, né, que veio desde o período de campanha de 2018, o atual presidente, né, declarou que não iria demarcar nenhuma terra indígena. Mas, para além da sua declaração, inicia-se no Brasil uma série de políticas de retrocesso de retiradas de direitos. O desmonte da política indigenista e ambiental que ocasionaram, na oportunidade, um dos maiores cenários de violência já vivido para os povos indígenas. Hoje, nós temos terras indígenas sendo invadidas por garimpeiros, por madeireiros, por grandes empreendimentos, pelo agronegócio. E essa tentativa de flexibilização dos direitos ambientais indígenas, que é uma outra frente que também é aliado, né, do presidente da República, que é o Congresso Nacional, onde ele tem uma grande bancada, tramita projetos de leis, PECs e PLs, no caso o PL 191, que trata sobre autorização de mineração dentro das terras indígenas, e o PL 490, que tenta flexibilizar, né, o usufruto exclusivo das terras indígenas. E também tenta aplicar uma tese que está em julgamento na Suprema Corte, que é a tese do marco temporal, que os povos indígenas só teriam direitos sobre seus territórios a partir do ano de 1988, que é a data, né, da promulgação da nossa Constituição. Se em 88 eles estivessem sobre o seu território ou reivindicando ele, teria direito sobre essa demarcação. Então, eles tentam apagar todo o cenário violento né,
right
promovido
to
pela
protect
colonização
our lands,
e
right
tirando
to,
esse histórico
protect
de
our
violência
identity, but what
promovido
do we
também,
have in return?
né, pela atuação
We
do próprio
are
governo,
encountered with
um
the
esbulho
same
possessório que nós
violence
chamamos
that
no
used to take
Brasil.
place during the
Então,
occupation,
diante desse
this
cenário,
time is
a
exercised
AIPP,
by the
juntamente com
government.
suas
What are we gonna
organizações
do with this
regionais,
scenario?
né,
We're
iniciou uma
trying
frente,
to resort
uma frente
to
de atuação,
some NGOs,
tanto no âmbito
to
do jurídico, né, a nível nacional,
organizations,
como
to
também
human
nas
rights-based
instâncias
organizations.
internacionais.
Also, we're trying
E isso
through
nós
the legal and
iniciamos
legislative
processo,
frameworks,
né,
be they
de acompanhamento
the
de
international
litigância
organizational
estratégica,
frameworks,
inclusive
and we
promovendo a ação na
actually
Suprema Corte,
started
a
a
qual
long way of
reconheceu a
struggle.
legitimidade
And
dos
in
povos
all
indígenas
this, we try to
ser
access
representado
even
pelas
the
suas
least of our
organizações.
rights of
Então,
the indigenous
reconhecendo a nossa
peoples.
organização
And through these
social
organizations, we
como
also try
legítima para
to
propor ação na
reach
Suprema
social
Corte, que até
organizations.
então isso
Everything
não era
that
nem
we do,
reconhecido.
indeed,
Nós não
and we
tínhamos
need
direito nem de
actually is
ingressar
a
com ação na
legislation
Suprema
that
Corte,
protects us,
até
that
esse reconhecimento do Supremo
recognizes
Tribunal
our rights.
Federal.
We have
E
rights, and
munido
the
disso,
first one
e
is
conforme, na
the
verdade,
right
foi
to
se
manage
firmando a
our land and
conjuntura
to live
brasileira
on these
de muita
lands.
violência, de muito retrocesso,
And
terras
I
indígenas
cannot
sendo invadidas
deny
diariamente,
the violence,
crianças
the
sendo
great
mortas
violence
pelo garimpo,
imposed on us,
né?
and I would say
O agronegócio
daily.
avançando
Our
sobre
children
nossas terras.
die day by
Nós
day
montamos uma
because
estratégia
of many
de conversar também, né, em outras esferas.
of many
E aí nós trazemos a
encroaches
Convenção
on
69 da
our lands
OIT,
and
nós trazemos a
our
Declaração Universal dos Direitos
and the
dos Povos
strategies
Indígenas,
that are
nós dialogamos
too
na revisão
offending for
periódica
us.
universal
Also the
e levamos
huge
para
woods
conhecimento do
that they take from
mundo,
our
né,
lands
o
and
que
from the
vinha
forests
sendo
that we live
promovido
in
em
have
termos de
led to
violações
the
de
death
direitos
of many
humanos, em termos de
lives.
violações de direitos ambientais.
How can we
E
all
ingressamos com
shoulder all
ação
this?
no Tribunal Penal
And I would
Internacional,
love to reiterate that
denunciando o
there
governo
is
brasileiro, né, por crime de
encroaching
ecocídio
and
e genocídio
violations
e crime
against
contra a
not just our
humanidade,
lands
uma
but
vez
our
que
rights as well. We have filed
o
a
desmonte da
lot of
política
cases
ambiental
with
estava
the Brazilian
ocasionando
government in
um
order
alto
to
índice de
ensure
desmatamento
at least
e os
some rights are
impactos
there.
que estavam sentindo,
And
que nós
another
estávamos sentindo
topic is
diretamente,
that they don't
irá
know,
afetar
they're
toda a
not
humanidade
aware that this
consequentemente.
would not just
Então, uma das
compromise
principais ações que a
our
PIB
lands or just
promoveu nos
Brazil,
últimos
but
tempos
all
foi
the
justamente ingressar com
global
esse
climate.
pedido
As you can
no
see, the
Tribunal
climate change is a
Internacional,
global
né,
issue.
o Tribunal Penal
How
Internacional.
can we
Para além do
increase
Tribunal
these actions against the
Penal
climate,
Internacional, nós
increase
nós
the climate
temos
action.
feito,
Possibly
né,
one
várias
day we would have
cautelares
to
junto ao
file a
CIDH.
lawsuit with
E
the
essas
international
cautelares
court.
têm
And this
garantido
actually
minimamente
happened. We
que
have
os povos
filed a
indígenas
lawsuit with the
alcancem
International Court of
cenários
Justice
internacionais
in
a
order
quais
to
nós
protect the
denunciamos
rights
as
of the indigenous
violações,
people.
por exemplo, contra o povo
And
Yanomami,
we
que teve
have
recentemente
submitted
ataque na sua
evidence
comunidade,
and
onde
proof
duas crianças foram
on the
tragadas
violence
por máquinas de
exercised
garimpo.
against our
Então, nós
peoples
estamos
from
constantemente informando
times,
a
times
essa
ago.
corte sobre
And
as
we
violações
have
do povo
submitted our
Yanomami e
proofs for our
Muduruku,
rights.
onde temos
But
várias
what we couldn't
lideranças
do
sendo
is to
ameaçadas,
inform
né,
and
por
to
esses
spread the
poderes.
knowledge
Eu
about
digo esses
what's taking
poderes que
place on
tentam,
our
de
lands.
certa
They
forma,
want to lay
usurpar,
their hands
né,
on these
os
lands,
direitos
but we
dos povos
have our
indígenas.
natural
São
leaders,
facções
and
que,
they are the
inclusive,
ones
estão
that
atuando de forma
protect the
ilegal,
rights of the
né, e
indigenous
promovendo essa
peoples.
violência.
We
Mas
try
aí,
to access our rights
com o
until
enfraquecimento da
today
política indigenista
through
ambiental,
legal
o Estado
and
brasileiro, por
fair
ação ou
methods.
omissão,
But
tem que se
unfortunately,
responsabilizar.
these
Uma vez que não existe mais, por exemplo, a
climate
frente
change issues are
etnoambiental
not
de proteção
helping,
das terras
and
indígenas. E
unfortunately
com isso, houve
also
um aumento
the
da
measures taken
violência
by the government
dentro
are
das
not
terras
helping.
indígenas.
They
E nós
know that
ingressamos na
protecting
Suprema
these
Corte com uma ação
forests
cobrando do Estado
mean
brasileiro
that
que criasse
this is
mecanismo de
protecting
proteção
the
dos
two lungs
territórios.
of the world,
Nós
and
fomos
that's
felizes
why
com essa
there
decisão,
is a
inclusive
lot
foi
to be
favorável
done
aos povos
by
indígenas,
the
mas
Brazilian
infelizmente o
government
Estado
and the
brasileiro,
Brazilian people in
né,
order to protect the rights of
contraria a
indigenous
decisão judicial
peoples.
e não
However, so
aplica a
far,
decisão, não
I'm
cumpre
saying
uma
that
decisão
in
judicial.
often
E onde
cases,
os povos indígenas vêm fazendo esse enfrentamento de
the
proteção
Brazilian
dessas
government
terras
does
no
not
próprio punho.
show any
Nós
interest
estamos
in what
cumprindo a
in the
função do
complaints
Estado
we
e aí
submit to it.
sofremos com
We're
as
trying
consequências
to
disso,
maintain
que é um
our
processo de
duties.
criminalização.
We're
E
trying
devido
to
à falta de demarcação e de
to
fiscalização,
tell about
existem forças
what's taking
econômicas,
place
grandes
against us, and this
corporações
is a
que
crime
atuam
against humanity.
contra,
That's why we
né,
would
os
love to
direitos dos povos
mobilize
indígenas
more
e iniciam
efforts
processo,
and
né,
more
contra essas forças de
will
liderança que faz
in
essa
order
defesa, que faz essa
to be
proteção,
able
ou que
to
faz a luta para a demarcação dos seus territórios.
defend our
Então é
rights, the
importante
rights of
dizer
the
que,
indigenous
para além das
peoples, we
instâncias
do not
internacionais,
want
e
to
para além
go to
do
war.
ingresso de
We don't want
ações
to
que
fight
garanta a proteção do
And
nosso
we
território,
do not like
nós
to
também
resort
temos
to
feito
violence,
isso, né?
but
As
all that we
autodemarcações,
want is
já que
to
o
protect
Estado
our
brasileiro,
rights.
mesmo
That's why
com
we
sentença,
try
mesmo
as
com
much
decisão
as
não
we
vem
can
cumprindo,
to
né?
tell
com o nosso
about what's
ordenamento
taken
jurídico
place,
e,
what's
e
taking place against
fortalecendo
us by the
o Estado
Brazilian
democrático
government.
de direito.
We don't
Então,
have a
hoje,
legal
a situação
framework
dos
or
povos indígenas não é só um
a
cenário de
mechanism
muita
on
violência e
which
de
to work,
retrocessos,
through which
mas
to work.
também,
But
né,
I would
de uma
love to
omissão do
say
Estado
that
brasileiro
the
que
position of the
promove
indigenous
e
peoples and
fomenta
our
a
peoples
destruição dos ecossistemas, em especial
is
dos
that they have
territórios
seen a
indígenas.
lot of
Então,
violence, and this
com todo
violence
esse
is not
cenário
just
que
against
um
our
pouco do
peoples,
que eu
but
pude
against the
narrar
climate,
aqui,
against the
né,
whole
nós
world. All
buscamos
these
mecanismos
scenarios and all this
internacionais
history,
com
I am bringing
incidência também
here to you. That's
dentro
why we
da
want
União
to
Europeia,
put
do
into
EFTA,
effect the international
desses
mechanisms,
espaços
by
internacionais
United
de governos e países,
by
né,
the-
para que possam criar mecanismos legais
the EU
de
in order to
combate,
find
né,
solutions
ao
for us. Maybe
desmatamento, que
we will try
garanta
to
ou pressiona o
create
Estado
new
brasileiro,
mechanisms
né, esse processo
to,
de demarcação.
protect our
Sabemos que é
rights and our
soberania do Estado,
livelihoods.
mas nós sabemos também que
We
os países
know
têm
that
influência
there
sobre outros
is a
países, de certa
leadership
forma,
for the government.
principalmente
We
de cunho
know
econômico.
that,
Então, para finalizar,
they,
eu digo
it's
que
their right
nós
to
estamos
protect their lands,
fazendo
but
com
also the
que
indigenous
os
people's
países não fiquem só
rights are
sabendo
to
do que
protect
está acontecendo
their
no Brasil, mas
children and the
também
livelihoods of
pedimos
their
que
children.
eles criem
And so
mecanismos,
maybe,
principalmente de
we can
proteção desses
help
territórios
with,
que estão sendo destruídos,
what the
principalmente
countries
para
are not able
garantir,
to do.
né,
We need
o avanço
mechanisms
do
to stop
agronegócio,
this,
a exportação ilegal de madeira e a extração
the
ilegal
mass
do ouro.
destruction that is
Obrigado.
being taking place and the unlawful exportation of woods and the destruction of forests. Thank you so much.
Dinamam, thank you so much. It's incredible to hear from you. Really appreciate you being here. Yessie, it's my pleasure to turn over the floor to you. Yessie Mosby, please tell us more about the work that you've been doing and whatever it is that you would like to share with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I've said everything at the first part, but I would love to share this one thing here. For all of us as indigenous people, we're unique ancestrally. Our present day today, we are creating our future, but we always show respect for our ancestors who have paved that way and that road for us. You know, for all of us, like my people in the Torres Strait and my mainland brothers and sisters on Australia, and I know this goes through, right through the world, that we're a race of people, that we are in tune with Mother Nature. We're a race of people that we see a cloud and it will predict the weather for tomorrow. We look at a plant and it will tell us that this fish is in spawning, do not eat. Touch another fish. We look at the star constellation where it sits on certain areas in the sky, tells us when to plant sweet potatoes. You and I all know that the government doesn't know all of these things. That's why the government doesn't care. And the greediness of this world goes to that extent that they ravage our land. They disturb our sacred sites. As for me and my people, we haven't contributed anything to fossil fuel. But our home is being raped, and my people cannot stop it. It's very sad when you got government people come to your island and tell you within 15 to 30 years, yous will be relocated. To where? Where shall we go? We don't want to be refugees in our own country, that's for sure. Nobody's going to remove us from our homes. Because that's where our genealogy lies, our lineage lies, our grandmother and our grandfather, our mothers and our fathers are buried there. The history of old is stored on this ancient sacred land where we call home and our mother. What's happening to my island is happening to a lot of people around the world. For that I want to say, me and my people, we honor every indigenous people on earth who breathes life, who carries their culture very strongly. We honor you. We honor everybody here in this room here. We honor everybody who walks through this gate, who has that one vision, which is to save what we have left for our future. We don't have any land to run to. God has placed us on a little island where we've been there for over 60,000 years. We won't move. The only thing we are asking, and we've asked the government to build us, to make a seawall which will be an ideal, safe seawall, which will be safer for the environment, because our island is one of the major breeding nesting ground for the green turtle and the oxbill turtle. And both of those animals, like we all know, are endangered species. We have to do something to save our animals around us too. Brothers and sisters, we're fighting for this home because Australia and Papua New Guinea can be damaged. Because people really do not understand, the government really do not understand how we understand and how we monitor the animals around us. There's birds in our islands which they sing love songs and welcome songs. When the birds from Australia fly and they do their migrational travel to the Papua New Guinea and the coast of Asia, they stop on our islands to rest, to drink, and to eat before they travel again. Now these birds are the food of some snakes on Australia and Papua New Guinea and Asia. If that bird dies of dehydration and starvation, then that snake will die. And if that snake will die, then what eats the snakes will die. Then it'll go to our plants and our forest. I am honored to sit with brother here beside me. The Amazon family's biggest rainforest here on earth. The Papua New Guinea islanders across from our waters, Australia and Asia, which carries the biggest rainforest on earth, which we as humans rely on these trees to live. But when you look at it and you go back down, if these islands are saved, then Australia and Papua New Guinea and the east of Asia will be saved. Then our race of people will be saved. The government has a lot to learn from us as indigenous people, because we are the only race of people that we have our antivenoms from plants and not the poisonous venoms of the snake, which we use, the government use. We are a powerful race of people that the world has a lot to learn from us. We are the hidden jewel of this world which needs to be saved. My people needs to be saved. We're 60,000 years old and we still are living proof of culture and our tradition. We don't want to be refugees and be placed on another man's land where we cannot practice what was practiced for us 60,000 years. My brothers and sisters, if the Australian government doesn't help us, then we know that there's a lot of doors here in this country will open their doors to help us. We know if we're neglected here, then we'll be accepted there. If our neighbor won't open that door to help us, then we'll go down to the next street for the help. If my country won't help us, then we'll go to another country to seek help. And if this country will help us, well, by all means, come home and save my people. Your help will contribute to save an ancient race of people where we live on little islands, where we call home, We're not asking for the government to give us a big giant land on the mainland. No, 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 no. We're just asking them to put a seawall, just a seawall. We don't ask them to build our islands out to be where it used to be. It would be a blessing if it could, but we did not ask for that. We only ask for a seawall. And if our government cannot help us in that way, then I know that there's a lot of brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles in this room from other countries will help us, so we can remain on our home for another 60,000 years, that our children and our children after them will live a happy life of practicing an ancient race of culture. I want to leave this message with you before I close. I have children. I know you have children. Some of you are grandparents. Some of you don't have children, but you are aunties and uncles. Some of you are not aunties and uncles, but you are a big brother or a big sister for your little siblings. For me to save my race, I know that if my future generation will suffer, then all of our children will suffer. It takes all of us in this world to move as one, as unity. Then definitely that wall of Jericho will fall. And our children, all of our children here on earth, will live a happy life. We all got placed on earth for a reason. And our reason is, our obligation is to protect what is ours. And what is ours is our children. And what is the future of our children is our mother, which is this Mother Earth, where we all of us call home.
Yessie, thank you so much. So after all of those incredible stories and examples, we still have more than 25 minutes left for questions for the panelists up here. So I will open it up to the audience. We welcome you to direct questions to the full panel or to individual panelists. The floor is to the audience. I think, do we have a mic? I don't believe we have a microphone, so please just go right ahead. Oh, we have one right here. Here we go. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Yang Lei from Eco Business. I'm a journalist from Singapore. I just want to ask about one climate solutions that's been gaining ground on carbon markets. There are some efforts ongoing now to operationalize the Paris Agreement markets. There are some efforts in the private sector also. I'm just wondering, do they go far enough to address the concerns that indigenous peoples may have? Because there have been issues of land rights and other issues. Thank you. It's for the whole panel. Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's take one more from the front here. I think the interpreter will be able to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Bom, eu sou brasileiro e ia perguntar para o Dinamam. Então, se eu estou perguntando para outro, ia ficar
I'm Brazilian and I'd like to speak in my native language.
Poderia, mas, né? Dinamam, você também mencionou sobre essa estratégia de litigância e muito no Brasil ocorre por conta de problema do desmatamento e as consequências para as mudanças climáticas, mas isso muito em relação a grandes corporações. E recentemente a AIPP tem lançado vários relatórios falando sobre o problema dessas grandes corporações no Brasil, especialmente na Amazônia. Eu queria perguntar se como vocês também pensam
to talk on
essa
the
litigância
illegal
em relação não
processes,
só
the
ao
aggressive
Estado
processes
brasileiro,
that
mas também em
are
relação
undertaken
às essas
by
grandes empresas
organizations
que
against
atuam na
indigenous
Amazônia e atuam
people.
no Brasil.
I'm saying that it's not only the Brazilian government, but the private companies who are using timber and agriculture in the Amazon region.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so the first question was to all panelists, and I think the second question was as well. So the first question was about carbon markets and the impact on land rights impact on land rights.
Yes, let me come just. It is good this time that our government give right to community to own their land. Now, with the issue of carbon payment, the government herself will tell the community that, yes, this is your strategy that we have to pass through, that you can benefit from carbon. Because right now, communities don't know the calculation of carbon until the government that have the policy and the framework inform community that this is how you will benefit from this carbon financing. So it's not directly community. But it is true and correct. As long as we have our land, if any transaction having to go on the land, it is our right to ask government that this transaction will name benefit from this. So I think it is our right, because Liberia government are giving us the right now to own our land, it is our right to request the government that this transaction will name benefit. So it is our right.
Yeah, on the carbon markets, this is a bit controversial for indigenous peoples because there are different perspectives. Some would like to engage more to protect their rights and gain benefits, but some are raising the issue of ethics. That is it ethical to commercialize something that is there that supports life for everyone? Especially now that we're talking of climate change, right? So for me, it's also, I look at it as more that we should treat carbon more of a social common good. That those that are protecting carbon should also be entitled to benefits for the role that they play. But we don't have to put it in commercial terms or in monetize carbon as if carbon is separate from nature or that is separate from the forest or from the trees or from the wildlife, from the flora and fauna. It should, we as indigenous peoples always look at this in a holistic, integrated manner. We don't isolate carbon because you can monetize carbon. Especially since it's also intangible. So while we recognize that of course forest plays a critical role in carbon sequestration, then we need to protect the forest. Why do we need to put it in monetary terms? We need to protect the forest and provide services and the needs of those protecting the forests. For me, that's the best approach, and that is the more sustainable approach, rather than monetizing and isolating carbon from the other values that other people attach to forests. Now, forest is being reduced to carbon, but for us, it's not carbon. Forest is definitely not carbon. It's our life. Thank you.
Thank you, Saye, and thank you, Joan. So the second question was about the impacts of private companies in addition to the impacts of governments on indigenous rights to land and about how that continues to drive climate change impacts. So I'll put that to the panel as well. Would anyone like to speak to the private sector impacts as well as government impacts on indigenous rights?
Então, Nós montamos algumas estratégias, principalmente no que tange
Actually,
os
we
acordos e
have
tratados comerciais
many
firmados com o Brasil.
strategies in
Nós
this
temos
regard.
atuação, por exemplo, no
We have
acordo Mercosul-União
tried
Europeia.
to
E esses acordos, ele também
reach,
acaba
some agreements with the
pressionando e
government
tensionando,
per se, the government of
essas
Brazil.
empresas que comercializa com o Estado brasileiro.
But
Para além disso, nós também
unfortunately,
ingressamos com uma ação contra um
till
caso
now,
chamado
the upper
caso Cassino,
was
que são as organizações
for
indígenas do
these,
Brasil,
private
que
companies
processaram
who
uma rede
are
de supermercado, na
working
verdade,
in
da Europa,
cutting timber
exigindo
and
que ela parasse de
using
adquirir produtos
and the
oriundo do
unfair
desmatamento
usage of all
ilegal
these
e oriundo de conflitos socioambientais
Brazilian
no Brasil.
forests.
Então nós buscamos
What I'm saying
mecanismos
here that those
legais
companies are
e também
working
atuamos
in illegal way and in illegal
em parceria
framework.
com outras organizações
What we are
indígenas e
trying
com
to do in the
aliados
time
em diversos
being
países
is
que
to
estamos cobrando,
develop some strategies
através de
and
vias judiciais, a
mechanisms
responsabilização
to
de
legalize
empresas
the
que
cutting
está
of timber
ligado, que fomenta
and
essa cadeia da
also to
destruição.
make
Então,
someone
de certa
accountable
forma,
or any
não é ela que está lá
organization
fazendo a destruição, mas está adquirindo o
And this
produto
way,
da
by this
destruição.
way,
Então, nós
we
trabalhamos
will
também na
control
incidência de rastreabilidade
this,
dos
severe
produtos, para saber quais são as principais
exploitation
empresas
for
que
all the goods of the
fomentam a
forests.
destruição não só na
We
Amazônia, mas em especial
asked
nos biomas brasileiros.
for a list
Para além disso,
for the
também atuamos
authorized companies
na
who
incidência
can,
política com diversos países
use the
para
goods of
exigir
forests,
que
but we
criem
didn't get this
mecanismos
list
legais
till
de
now.
rastreabilidade
I can
e que
say that in
penalizem
many
essas
countries,
empresas que estão
they
adquirindo
criminalized
produtos
such
oriundos do
acts,
desmatamento,
but
de
in
conflitos
Brazil, till
socioambientais.
now,
Então,
those
nós
companies
atuamos
are
na
not
esfera
convicted
jurídica,
with
no
any
processo físico
crime.
mesmo, como aconteceu do caso
And
Cassino,
I'm saying
mas também
that,
fazemos essa incidência política
should
com diversos
face
países,
all
principalmente
these
da União
challenges
Europeia
by
e
unifying
mais
our
recentemente
efforts.
agora
If there
nos
are
Estados
legal
Unidos,
frameworks,
para criar
with
mecanismos de
collaboration
rastreabilidade
with government
que puna empresas
or the
que fomentam
government
essa
of
cadeia da destruição
USA, so
dentro e fora das
that
terras
we can
indígenas.
develop certain special mechanisms for the two Americas, and also the UN should protect our rights as indigenous people.
Yeah, I want to, with the discussion on the role of the private sector or business, I wish to draw attention actually to the report that we are issuing. It's called Protector, Not Prisoner. Indigenous peoples face rights violation and criminalization in climate action. And we are citing specific cases of violations of our rights by mining companies and other companies engage in what they call greenwashing, actually. But in terms of tools, what we are using is the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights because it sets the responsibility of business to respect human rights, and that includes the rights of indigenous peoples, including our right to free, prior, and informed consent. And also the government needs to regulate companies to respect rights. So the states should also use its power to regulate companies instead of becoming the partners of companies in violating our rights. And they need to respect and recognize our land rights so that companies will not say that they have the right over our land. And that is always the case. So, I'm really happy that our brother here has highlighted the need for us to work together to demand accountability. We need accountability and access to justice when companies violate our rights. That's the only way also that we can regulate their activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinamam. Thank you, Joan. We can take a few more questions from the audience. I see a gentleman over here. We have not had any questions from women in the audience yet as well, so if we do have questions from ladies, I'd like to prioritize those as well, but please go ahead, sir.
I'd like to express my deep appreciation for your sharing your truths. I am with Indigenous Clean Energy from Canada. Indigenous rights are essential to a planet we can save. And in Canada, Indigenous communities have also asserted rights over truly reconcilable and reconciliation sustainable energy system. And in that regard, Yessie, I can't help you build a seawall, but I'll help you build a clean energy system, one that gets away from diesel, one that you own, that you have rights over. Because if we express rights and hold those rights over land and wildlife and fishery and culture, I also believe that part of the centrality of the future is holding the rights over truly just and clean energy. Thank you.
We do have a couple questions over here. I believe this lady in the back was first, and then we have this woman in the front here.
Can I answer in Spanish? My English is not so good.
Of course, please.
Okay. Ustedes han mencionado que hay que regular el accionar de las empresas en la perspectiva de derechos humanos. Mi pregunta es, ¿están funcionando algunos mecanismos que ya existen?
What I'm saying, is there any mechanism,
algunos mecanismos que sabemos que ya existen, como la diligencia
do we
libre,
have any
previa
mechanism on
informada,
ground,
tratado
or there are any
vinculante, el
frameworks
acuerdo
for
de Escazú,
collaboration,
o la
any
consulta
companies
libre previa
who work with
informada,
governments
o
so
es
that we
simplemente
can
una
preserve our
normativa,
own legacy?
unas
So
herramientas jurídicas
it's
que
just
existen,
about actions
pero que
or
en la
hopes
realidad
or
no
just
están
good
funcionando,
intentions.
porque
So
la pregunta va,
all these
porque como
things
ustedes lo han
are
mencionado,
totally
necesitamos
irrelevant to the
implementar estas
reality,
herramientas,
because the
pero ¿es
actual
esto
reality is
realmente
much harder.
factible?
So
¿Qué
when
nos hace
we
falta para que
talk
realmente
about
la
our
normativa
history,
jurídica y legal que
we
existe
do not just
pueda
tell
realmente
stories,
permitirnos
but
regular el
would
accionar
like
de
to
las
change the
empresas sobre los
reality, would
territorios,
like
blindar los
to
derechos humanos y
see
sobre todo
some
mitigar estos
serious
procesos o
actions,
estas
some frameworks,
problemáticas que tenemos de
some
crisis
strategies,
ambiental y
some
climática.
rights,
Gracias.
so that we can some rights so can preserve these rights and preserve the climate
Great,
change
thank
impact.
you. And then we'll take one more. Thank you.
Hi, I just walked in recently. Thank you so much, all of you. So I'm sorry if this question is has already been spoken to, but I'm wondering what role scientists have played in the preservation and the advancements of Indigenous rights in your communities. Have you found relationships with scientists to be useful? Is there a place for the natural sciences where you all need them in order to advance Indigenous rights? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll take the first question for the panel first. So the lady in the back asked about a further question on what frameworks there are on the ground for holding companies accountable and for ensuring rights are recognized.
Okay, let me just speak to that. For every country to have their own way of handling citizen affair. In some country, let me just take this to my country, Liberia. We have civil society. If you request government that this is what we need, and the government is relenting on that, you engage civil society to assist you, because you need to know some legal reliances that you will speak on. Which part of the law, what law will you use? It is true and correct, it is our home, but the government have huge power over the resources. But if you engage the government through civil society, government will also understand that these people, they have their right. We have universal right that you can look at and request government that through this right, we want you to grant us permission. You apply to government. So I know that government themselves, they are citizens like you. And if you are requesting for some help, it is a responsibility as government to help you. Government is continuity. You serve, you leave, another person comes. So, like what we are seeing now, climate change is everybody's business. So when somewhere is getting, we are feeding climate change impact, negative impact, it is the government responsibility to look after citizens. But where citizen is requesting to be part of certain management, it is a government right citizen right to give the right to them. So I set the example with my own country. Like today we have two good rights, Land Rights Act and Community Right. So these two rights, one right over forest and one right over land. So it is how the government is treating us fairly. What we need now is to ask the government to ask UN to see how best we can manage our remaining land and forest. So for you, the question you ask, it is the government who have to assist the citizens through civil society, because civil society are a pressure group. They make the government to understand that this is what you're supposed to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And would anyone like to take the second question on the role of scientists in supporting the rights of Indigenous peoples?
I think it's actually scientific evidence that has proven that we are undergoing climate change, right? And at the same time, indigenous knowledge also pointed that out early on by our Inuit brothers and sisters in the Arctic. Now with the push of indigenous peoples, we actually have the Indigenous Peoples Platform on traditional knowledge in recognition of the invaluable contribution of indigenous peoples to climate change adaptation and mitigation. And we believe that under that platform, scientific knowledge and traditional and indigenous peoples' knowledge are on equal footing. So in that regard, as long as the scientist, the natural scientist also respects traditional knowledge and indigenous peoples' rights, I think it's actually the climate issue is an opportunity to strengthen that collaboration between natural scientists and indigenous peoples in finding solutions to climate change and at the same time upholding the rights of indigenous peoples.
What you have all shared with us today has been so incredibly moving and so rich, and your depth of knowledge and expertise is just incredible. Oh, I'm so sorry, Yessie. Please go ahead. You had one more point you wanted to share to this question? Yeah,
just
please
for
go
the
ahead.
second question,
Yes.
a short one. Just wanted to share for that sister there. You know, or for all of us, sorry. Western knowledge and indigenous knowledge can work together. That's all there. They can both work together to make things right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yessie. So I want to invite each of you as we close to give us just 1 minute of a takeaway or an action that you would like to share with the audience. What would you like to leave the audience with? What is the most important thing you'd like everyone to leave the room with today? So we'll start with Joan. Joan, please give us your...
Maybe we can turn it around.
Oh, we'll turn... That's a great idea. Let's turn it around. Yessie, can we start with you? Can you give us your 1 minute call to action or takeaway thought for the audience today?
Well, family, regardless what color skin we are, where we are in this world, we all bleed the same and we all have the same. Our babies, our mothers give birth, carries our babies 9 months. We all have a duty of care, and is to protect what is ours, and our future is ours. We must work together to save our future generations. Like I said before, let that true ancient knowledge, let the westernized and the ancient knowledge join together to make something right. Thank you.
Eu acho que a mensagem é que nós somos povos indígenas, faz parte da solução né, no combate às mudanças climáticas e o aquecimento global.
We are all
Então, se nós fazemos parte, nós temos que estar no centro da discussão e trazendo a gente sempre não trazendo a gente para fazer o debate e respeitar o nosso posicionamento. Então, se nós estamos contribuindo no combate ao aquecimento global e às mudanças climáticas, então nós pedimos demarcação, demarcação, demarcação.
We cannot do that without a fight against emissions. Do we want to leave a print? Yes, we want to leave a print.
Okay, my take is that policy that is made in a country should look at the welfare of the citizens. The policy affect the citizen positively, affect the citizen negatively. So policy-driven must also take into consideration citizen affair. Thank you.
What I want you to do is actually to ask the negotiators here to stop the negotiations and come listen to the people. Listen to the demands of those whose lives are affected by climate change. And more importantly, to act with a sense of urgency on the demands of the people on the ground, to pay up to loss and damages, to stop fossil fuel mining, and to respect the rights of human beings, to respect nature, and to renew our relations with Mother Earth, because if we don't, all of us will not survive. Thank you.
I'll close this with one last thought. One of the writers and speakers from the Indigenous community that I am a huge fan of, Tyson Yukaporta, he has said that when you look at a society, you can look at the way that they treat women and girls, and that is the way that they treat Mother Earth. So that is my charge to you as you are listening and thinking at COP, to call out for action on gender equality and social inclusion, to call out for inclusion for Indigenous peoples and local communities, to pay attention to how negotiators and events at COP are thinking about inclusion for women and girls in particular. We need climate justice, and that means climate justice for people of all genders and for youth in particular. Thank you so much. We are so glad. I want to thank ClientEarth for being my co-host today and for putting this event together, and my huge appreciation to Joan, to Saye, to Dinamam, and to Yessie for their incredible sharing with us today, and thank you all for attending. Thank you so much.